My neighbor destroyed over $47,000 worth of timber on my property without a single word, without a permit, without even knocking on my door. What they didn't know, I had every single tree mapped, measured, and documented. An invoice I handed them. They never saw it coming. Stop scrolling. I need you to hear this completely. My neighbor illegally cut down dozens of trees, some over 60 years old, without permission, without a permit or warning. They figured I wouldn't notice. They figured I wouldn't do anything at all. They figured wrong because I didn't call the cops first. I didn't scream over the fence. I didn't post about it online. I just sat down right there. I opened my records and I sent them the most expensive piece of paper they have ever received in their life. Welcome to HOA Drama Neighbor. Buckle up. Let me take you back about 3 years ago to see how this started. I purchased a piece of land on the edge of town, 14 acres of mixed hardwood and pine, mature oak, black walnut, and white ash. If you know timber, you know those aren't just trees. Those are decades of slow growth. Those are decades of value, and in some cases, irreplaceable specimens that can't simply be replanted and apologized for. I paid good money for that land, and a large part of that price was the standing timber on it. From the day I closed on that property, I documented everything. I had a diameter at breast height, estimated board feet of usable lumber, and approximate market value for each significant tree on my land clearly. I did this because I'm meticulous, not because I expected this. But as it turns out, that paperwork was about to become the most important thing I owned. My neighbor, let's call him Calvin, had the parcel directly adjacent. Calvin and I were never close. We'd nod across the fence maybe twice a year. No disputes, no drama, or so I thought. One Thursday morning in late October, I drove out to the property to check on some fencing I repaired. I parked at the gate like always. I walked the path along the western tree line like always. And then I stopped dead in my tracks. The trees were completely gone, not trimmed, not thinned, just gone. Stumps and sawdust. Skid trails in my soil where logging equipment had dragged heavy trunks across my land. A whole corridor of my timber, I estimated on the spot, barely breathing, had been clear-cut right up to and beyond my line. Fresh cuts. Some stumps were still bleeding sap. This had happened within the last 48 hours. I stood there for a long time, not screaming, not crying, just standing there silently, doing the math inside my head. I knew exactly what those trees were worth because I had the paperwork, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I walked the entire area before I touched my phone. I counted every single loss out there. I photographed every stump, every skid mark, and every piece of evidence I could find. Then I called my arborist. Then I called my attorney. In that exact order. I did not call Calvin to complain about it at all. Here's something most people don't know, and I want you to pay close attention if you own land. Timber trespass laws exist in most U.S. states, and the penalties are severe. In many jurisdictions, the party is liable. The party responsible for unauthorized timber removal could easily be held liable for 2, 3, or even 4 times the value of the timber taken. Not replacement cost, but market value of the mature timber. This is not small claims territory. This is serious circuit court money. My attorney confirmed what I suspected immediately. Calvin had hired a logging company, and whether through negligence or total disregard, they had crossed my clearly marked property line and harvested timber that was not theirs to touch. The survey pins were there. The posted signs were there. The documentation was completely airtight for us. The arborist assessment came back within a week. 41 trees, species ranging from white oak to black walnut. Combined stumpage value. That's the price of standing timber before processing. Calculated at $47,200. Under the timber trespass statute in my state. The statutory damages could run as high as 3 times that figure. I had Calvin's logging company's name from the equipment markings. I had photographs clearly. The photos were time-stamped and geotagged. I had a licensed survey confirming my property boundary. I had the original arborist documentation from when I purchased the land. In short, I had everything ready. Calvin had nothing but the lumber he'd sold and whatever money he thought he'd saved on land clearing. 3 weeks after I discovered the damage, my attorney sent Calvin a formal legal demand letter right away. Attached to it was the full damage assessment of every tree itemized, every single dollar documented, and a clear statement of intent to pursue statutory timber trespass damages if the matter was not resolved. I know the exact moment Calvin received it because within 4 hours his truck was in my driveway. He came to the front door looking like a man who'd just been told his house was on fire. I didn't invite him in. I stood on the porch. I let him talk first. He said the logging company had made a mistake. He said he hadn't authorized them to go past his property line. He said he was truly sorry for what happened out there. He said he didn't think it was that big a deal. He actually said that they were just trees. Just trees. Sir, black walnut trees take 60 to 80 years to reach maturity. You cannot go to the nursery and buy one. You cannot buy one back. You cannot apologize one back into existence. Those trees were there before either of us was born, and they will not be there for us because someone decided without asking to clear it. They decided that they needed to be removed. I told Calvin calmly that I wasn't there to discuss the logging company's intent. I was there to discuss the remediation of my property, and I handed him a copy. I handed him a copy of the demand letter in person to make sure there was no misunderstanding about what was in it. Calvin hired an attorney. His attorney pushed back, arguing the logging company bore it all. They argued the logging company bore primary responsibility and suggested that my damages were overstated. My attorney strongly disagreed and submitted a supplemental brief citing the specific statute. We cited the specific timber trespass statute, 3 comparable case precedents, and a revised damage figure, now incorporating the statutory treble damages clause that put the potential liability very high. It put the total liability at just over $141,000. Calvin's willingness to negotiate became substantially more cooperative at that point. I won't give you the final settlement number due to an agreement. That's part of a confidentiality agreement. What I will tell you is this. I was compensated fairly. I was also compensated for a portion of my legal fees, and a formal acknowledgement of liability was signed. The logging company's insurer was also brought into the process, and they ultimately bore a significant portion of the settlement. Calvin and I no longer nod at each other across the fence line at all now. I consider that an acceptable outcome. The difference between someone who gets walked over and someone who wins is almost always paperwork. Know your property, know your rights, and know exactly what you own. Know it before someone else decides they can take it from you. If you're a property owner, I want you to do something this week. Get your land surveyed if you haven't recently. It is worth the extra effort. Document your significant trees with a licensed arborist. Take photographs of your property line markers and post them to a secure cloud drive with a timestamp. None of this takes more than a single weekend. It takes a weekend and a few $100s. What it gives you is armor. Because the reality is, neighbor disputes are almost never about malice. They're almost always about assuming. Someone assumed lines. Someone assumed the line was further than it was. Assumed you wouldn't notice. Assumed you wouldn't push back. Documentation ends assumptions completely. If this happened to you or something like it, tell me. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I've started turning the most compelling ones into episodes right here on HOA Drama Neighbor. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what is coming next here. I have a mailbox full of stories, and some of them are going to make this one look incredibly tame. Make sure to share this video with fellow landowners. Subscribe to HOA Drama Neighbor for more.